Greetings from the future. I'm your host of Rewatch, presented by the Not Funny Guys, Dr. John, and I'm going to tell you today, I've been under the weather this week, but I recorded one episode earlier this week that I didn't get around to post, episode 34, and now I'm going to go ahead and add episode 35 to it, so you get a double feature today, so enjoy, and remember, keep it not funny. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Not Funny Guys Presents Red Dwarf Rewatch. I am your host, Dr. John, coming in a little bit late, a little under the weather, so apologies for that. But we are now moving on, and we are rolling right along into the back half of Series 6, and we have now arrived at Episode 4, Emohawk, Polymorph 2, directed by Andy DeEmony, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. Released on the 28th of October, 1993. Now, I do want to say, I think in the last episode I mentioned maybe we're doing a retcon. We're not actually doing a retcon. We just found another way to insert the Emohawk. This time is the pet of a Gelf. Last time, I think they were an experiment gone wrong. Now, we've turned them into something else. But hey, that's fun. The Emohawk polymorph thing was always a hoot. So let's talk about summary. Starbug is attacked by an advanced Space Corps enforcement probe made primarily for looting from derelict ships. They just hijacked and broke in and hacked into them, of course, is I think what Lister says. The crew managed to escape by entering Gelf space, but Starbug crashed on the moon. Lister then must marry a Gelf chieftain's daughter in exchange for an oxygeneration breathing unit that they need for their ship to leave. The crew escape with the engine part during Lister's honeymoon, but the Gelf chieftain sends his pet polymorph after them to retrieve his new son-in-law when he also skips out and leaves. Now let's break this down a little bit. So, we open with Starbug in space, the crew is asleep, and Rimmer has really gone back to his roots because he runs in telling them scramble, they're on alert. He tells them all these terrible things are happening to the ship, and of course it's a drill. Like I said, classic Rimmer here. Rimmer then, like I said, he's gotten back to his old pretentious self. It's quite refreshing. But apparently it takes 1 hour and 17 minutes for this drill to run. Worst time ever because the cat and Lister don't take him seriously, and of course they stop for breakfast. Rimmer then gets on to them about, talking about, do you think I get pleasure out of this sort of like over ham-fisted, nitty-gritty nonsense anal retentiveness? And Creighton's in the background nodding his head, and he's like, yes, of course, he admits it. Good. Rimmer then gives onto a theory about short hair being a way for people to win battles. I think he uses a couple examples like the Romans versus Germans, the Roundheads beating the Cavaliers in the English Civil War, and then of course Vietnam, both sides crew cuts draw. Lots of fun examples. Thanks, Rimmer. All of a sudden something's incoming. Cat senses it first, then it comes up on the scanners. This is when they find this whole space probe approaching them, and it keeps coming out and knocking them around. And of course Rimmer once again tries to quote a Space Corps directive, and Crichton corrects him. Favorite gag. So this ship is like decloaking on them. It turns out it's a Space Corps enforcement probe, but somehow its programming has been scrambled, and it's been telling them that they are charged with theft for all the looting, the derelicts they've been doing. And apparently the penalty is death. Faced with the situation, Crichton once again offers himself to give up himself to protect the crew. They have once again, of course, do what they always do. They run instead. They run straight for Gelf Zone nearby. Dangerous place for them, but it's better off than this. And by the way, these Gelfs are not the pleasure Gelfs we learned about in Camille. These are, I'd say, just as ugly, but definitely more hostile to humans. They avoid the first and second shots, the warning shots. They manage to shake it, but then they get hit. They're damaged, they're on fire. They then fly at this skull-shaped moon while a warning signal comes out from the Gelfs, and then the enemy, the probe, fires at it and destroys it, but they manage to go through the eye when it blows up and out the other side. Real lucky. But now they're crash landing. And so they crash land on the Gelf moon into like this swamp watery area. They gather the supplies that have left. They've all their possessions. They're taking stock. Crichton finds Lister's guitar has survived intact, but then Cat breaks it and he's like, well, even Lister's guitar didn't make it. So the engine room is flooded, but Lister's got the pumps going. They have everything that can be done by auto repair that can be fixed except for the oxy generator. The oxygen generator, they need that. Otherwise, Cat and Lister will suffocate in space, for which Rimmer doesn't seem a problem. But of course he doesn't. So they have to go find the Gelfs to see if they can trade for this needed component. It's really their only option. You see them, they take a boat, they get on the land out of the swamp. They get shot at this chest they're carrying the goods in by an arrow, and Cat tries and fails to read it for some sort of clue. He's like, yes, it definitely came from a bow. Fortunately, this is from the Kentanawabi tribe. Crichton knows their dialect, and he says this warning arrow was actually a good sign because generally they would have killed them. And then apparently this is one of the more friendly tribes. So they're in luck. They arrive at the village. Crichton does a lot of the talking because he can translate their dialogue. These creatures are ugly as sin, but that's kind of the point. And so they start offering them up Swiss Army watches, hats, Levi jeans, cigars. It sounds like, people in the 1980s and 70s trading with some like Warsaw Pact country, or a third world country today. They get invited into the hut, and apparently all this stuff they handed out was just to get in the hut. This is where they did now spot the Emohawk, which Crichton identifies it's a pet of the chieftain. It's a polymorph. And so they are going to need whatever they can to trade for the oxygeneration unit. So now the negotiations begin. This was just the price of entry. And so apparently they figure out that what the chief wants is for Lister to marry one of his 3 daughters. Apparently the looker. You wouldn't call her a looker. Lister is very against this. But apparently it's a very firm thing. No wedding, no unit. They then get 5 Gelf somethings to decide, which is apparently 1 Earth minute. Rimmer gives a lecture to Lister about sacrifice. Crichton reminds Lister that they will not change their mind. This is set. So Cat says, hey, look, we'll do the wedding. We'll come back and rescue. And this seems like a preposterous type, but that's exactly what they do. Because when we cut to the wedding. And so at the wedding, Rimmer catches the bouquet and has one of the other Gelf women like winking at him. And then, of course, the Gelf bride then throws Lister over her shoulders and carries him off for the honeymoon. Crichton makes the final exchange in this weird like handshake, grab your legs. Looks like something out of a Monty Python Funny Walks bit. But they get the oxygen generation unit and they're off. I guess they're still planning to come get Lister later. But as the crew leaves, Lister is now in the hut. And he's laid down to bed. And this Gelf bride is really into, we're going to get it on. He keeps trying to make excuses and get under the covers to go to sleep. She is very insistent, and he is very much trying to get out of it. Apparently, it just becomes too much. He then makes an excuse, and he runs for it. In fact, he runs past the crew as they're leaving the village, and now they're all running. The bride comes out weeping and crying, and her father sicks his Emohawk on them for revenge. He goes after them in a flight form and attacks them and then transmutates. The cat picks up a stick from the ground. He is the stick. He throws it. Well, in the shuffle, Lister's hat gets knocked off. And when he goes to pick it up, it's the Emohawk. We get little cutaways to it, but his hat just stayed on the ground. So they make it back to Starbug. He puts the hat on the crate, and they basically have 1 hour before it'll be ready. So they just decide to take off now and use backup oxygen. The Emohawk is the hat, of course, now turns into a chicken and goes into the kitchen. Lister and Crichton go down into the engine room to hook up the thing and fix the ship. Cat goes to wash his hands. He then starts smelling the Emohawk again. He goes into the kitchen and sees that it has now become this big thing of baked beans, and it attacks him. It steals his cool. He's now, once again, Dwayne Dibley. And then it leaves. It goes out in the cockpit. It comes in as like a paper airplane, and Rimmer crumples it up and throws it away. He hears Cat coming. He comes out of the cockpit. He's lost it in the main room. Cat can't smell it anymore. Rimmer picks up a gun, and then he's like, oh my god, it could be the gun. So he checks in space, and it was like their only gun. Rimmer tries to message and goes back into the cockpit, tries to message Crichton and Lister about the situation, but somehow the microphone doesn't work. It's the Emohawk. And it takes his negativity, his bitterness, his snideness, and when he comes out, he has basically been transformed into Ace Rimmer. Selfless and heroic. What a guy. Cat changes into a really lame outfit to more match his personality, and Rimmer goes down and locks Crichton and Lister into the engine room to protect them. Apparently he plans to eject the Emohawk into space, but that means creating a vacuum. They ask, what about the cat? He's like, I'm going to snap his neck to save him the pain. It's really dumb, over the top, unnecessary. But it's like the kind of blind, heroic nonsense that's just... his mind is now being, of course, being distorted by the Emohawk. Crichton and Lister manage to blast their way out bazookoids and get to them before they eject through the airlock into space, saving the day, mainly for the cat. Because he was planning, Rimmer was planning to kill him as a mercy kill. So then they decide they're going to use this liquid nitrogen stuff to basically freeze it. They go on a hunt. They randomly shoot at everything, getting super paranoid. Lister's gone super anxious. Dwayne finds his thermos on the ground, picks it up, and realizes he has 2 thermoses. Calls out to them, it's the Emohawk. It then turns into a grenade. It falls on the ground. It blows up, but Rimmer throws himself on top of it to save them. Holds it down while they freeze it. So now they've solved the problem. Rimmer, apparently they can use the DNA to give them back their stuff. So like they can give Cat back his cool. But Rimmer is very insistent that he doesn't go back to being his self yet. He really hates his other self. And they're talking about a 24-hour reprieve when the cat accidentally freezes them. And that is the episode. Short, tight. I think, still a fun episode, but it's very tightly packed, fast-paced, lovely episode. But next time we'll be getting to Rimmerworld. So now we've cleared up my initial thoughts about the idea that this could somehow be a retcon, which I'm glad we didn't do that. I couldn't remember, so now we've cleared that bit up. So that's good. So, like I said, next time, Rimmerworld. Welcome back, everybody, to Not Funny Guys Presents Red Dwarf Rewatch. I am your host, Dr. John. And we are moving on here to our penultimate episode of Series 6. We have arrived at episode 5 of Series 6, Rimmerworld, directed by Andy Doemeny, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. Original release date, 4th of November, 1993, when I was roughly 13 years old. It's probably around the same time I actually started watching the episodes on PBS, to be quite honest. Let's not waste too much time on that, since we've already got part 1 that hopefully you just seen, to a summary. The crew return to the wreck of a simulant's battleship to salvage food supplies, but are confronted by a surviving simulant who threatens to kill herself and the crew. Rimmer, who is once again being a complete utter coward, but also having been diagnosed with a tense nervous disorder, escapes in a pod with hatch which has no steering. The crew also escapes, but he is whisked away and ends up falling into a wormhole, and rather than a year and a half, he is going to have to wait 600 years for them to catch up to him. For them, it will only be a couple hours. The crew follow him into the wormhole, but yes, he is there for 600 years on a planet that he manages to populate with a bunch of himself. Never been such a worse idea. So let's break this down. So we have Rimmer undergoing the test. He's gotten this physical he's requested. Apparently he cheated on the eye exam by writing the answers after he snuck in and wrote the answers on his shoes. Sounds very much like, he calls it persistence. He's competitive. He gets his results. Crichton asks him to take a seat. Talks about, next of kin. He says, well, they've all died of heart attacks and all these other things. And Crichton then asks him, how do you like your news? The straightforward awfulness or the happy fantasy? He then says, happy fantasy. And Crichton then proceeds to lie to him that everything's fine. But then Rimmer just can't let it go. He's pushing and pushing, and he negotiates to have the truth. Turns out, even in his hard life version, any flaws of his genetic material have been carried over as a part of a flaw in an algorithm that originated his original soft light version of himself. And so he is in a situation where he might suffer from what is apparently a real thing, where a hologram can die. It's apparently rare. So Rimmer basically has a stress disorder. He even starts hyperventilating, and apparently his version of the blood pressure is off the charts. He needs to start, according to Crichton, a program of relaxation to avoid stress. Crichton even gives him those Chinese worry balls. Asks Kay to keep it a secret from the crew. When Lister comes in, they found the simulant ship that they fired on weeks earlier, Gunmen of the Apocalypse. That's that ship back in that episode. So now they're trying to go on board to get supplies, and there's this whole debate about how this is really dangerous. Not sure if there's any survivors. The ship is unstable. Rimmer is very much against this, but basically their food supply is very limited. They're down to fungi and Crichton making nettle soup, and Lister just can't take it anymore. But that's not it. It's a series of Lister revealing things that only make Rimmer's situation worse. Not only are there is food on the ship because they like to torture captives, but also there's a lot of other things. Apparently they're also running out of fuel and other things, and so there's like this long series of like Rimmer getting hyperventilating and panic attacks from Lister unveiling things that he's been holding back from everybody and lying about the readouts and stuff. At one point, Rimmer once again does his classic misquote space store directives, and Rimmer and Crichton corrects him. Interestingly enough, Rimmer and Crichton are on the same side of this whole argument until he gets Rimmer turns on Crichton once he volunteers that they go because they're not living creatures. Lister tells him, like I said, the food needed too. Rimmer continues to have these escalating panics. He's grinding those balls as Crichton tells him to, Chinese Warriors ball. All these scenarios are all bad about what might happen if they go on the ship. It could collapse, they could get killed by simulants, all these things. They dock, they go on board the ship. At one point, Rimmer tries to insist he stay on board until Lister uses some more fears about a boarding party that then convinces him to go. Once they're on board, they do find a life sign, but then Lister does this thing once more where he reveals that they can't use the Zoogoids if they encounter one of these, because the ship is so unstable and the superstructure is so fragile. And he even says, and it could collapse on them, he says, I didn't want to panic anyone. He has to tell them to even be quiet about things. They shouldn't make large noises or anything. And remember, once again, panics. Fortunately for them, they find a teleporter. And they start loading goods and they send it off. And the last one they drop and it tracks some noise. And they finally do encounter the first officer from Gunmen of the Apocalypse, who's the only survivor. Kat is obsessed with the fact that she's seeing him in an almost identical outfit to what she would have seen in him last time, but he's very insisting that it's not the exact same one because he would rather die than have somebody see him in the same outfit twice. We see that Rimmer has snuck away, and we end up eventually seeing him behind her. At one point, it's kind of funny, Lister even hits on her, but you're not bad. And then she shoots the ship, and things are starting to collapse and things are getting rushed. Rimmer is behind her, and when Lister is like speaking through the simulant, she thinks he's talking to her. He's talking through her to Rimmer as he decides to get an escape pod rather than stop the simulant. The escape pod launches, creates the final quake. They manage to use the teleporter, even though there's a 20% chance it might turn them inside out, to escape back to Starbug. They accidentally teleport to apparently a game they were playing last Tuesday. The other Crichton starts chewing them out about how dangerous it is to time travel. The other Rimmer is told that he escaped in the escape pod, and he's like, oh, good, he's handsome. He's wonderful, he's safe. There's all this concern about influence. They jump away. This time they do make it onto Starbug. Crichton tells them about Rimmer's condition at this point, and they're not sympathetic after they escape. They contact Rimmer in the pod, and he claims it was all a plan. But the pod is out of range and accelerating. It's a seed pod. It's homing in on the nearest planet. Scans reveal that it'll basically be a year and a half. He'll make it to the planet. It'll take them a year and a half to catch him after he makes it there. Instead, though, Rimmer's pod falls into a wormhole. And what will basically, he'll make planetfall in 4 days. But there's a problem. There's a time dilation. So what will be only hours for the crew to catch up to him will be 600 years for him on the other side. He gets cut out while apparently complaining about this, and Crichton then is able to kind of remind him, try to stay stress-free. For them, like I said, a few hours. For Rimmer, 600 years. Rimmer lands on the planet. He starts doing an audio log that we listen to. Shows him exploring the wasteland, starts terraforming. He's worried he'll have a problem communicating with single-celled organisms on the planet, but there is hope. He finds these eco-accelerator rockets and sets them off, and then, plays his own version of God, where 6 days and nights the storms rack the planet. It stops, he comes out, and it's basically a garden. He now names it Rimmerworld. He is the Adam of this world in his own Eden, and he wants to create his own Jane. I'm assuming this is a Jane of the Jungle, like a Tarzan reference, because apparently he doesn't get Eve out of this, he gets Jane. Alright. Seeks to create a clone of himself. When it comes out of a cocoon, unfortunately, it looks just like him. Male. He goes back to try again. And that's where we leave him. We now cut back to the crew. So we now obviously jump ahead 600 years, cut back to the crew. They come in, they start landing on the planet. They find life forms, thousands of them. And they quickly realize these have to be clones of Rimmer. When they're walking around looking for, civilization, they're captured by a bunch of Roman-like soldiers, all of them who look like Rimmer. And anybody, because they look differently, they're deviants. It's like a real weird racial makeup thing. It's like, ugh. They're all incest too, you know that. Yeah, we know that. Lister, of course, makes the corny cliche line for which Crichton will chide him, "Take us to your leader." They think they're being taken to their Rimmer. They are taken to the Great Leader, where apparently there's talk about genetic mutations are an abomination. The leader is not Rimmer. He does have an H on his head, but that's an affectation. He is in fact human. And when he sends the women, his loves, away, they pull the mask back and we see that they have Rimmer's face too. It's... The crew is going to be put on trial. They're charged with deviancy. They mention the fact that none of them tried to sell each other out or bribe them or do all the wormy, disgusting things. They apparently were brave and honorable. They lacked anything that fits the definition of Rimmerness. I like that word. Rimmerness. The leader then gets mad at them and is told he's not the real Rimmer by Crichton. And this gets him thrown in prison. They're to be killed at dawn, and apparently he wants to eat their ashes. In the prison cell, they finally find their Rimmer. He's worried Chinese worry balls have been reduced to these little tiny, smaller than marbles. And he also has trouble remembering their names. Lister has apparently now become Derek Custer. Cat is Kit, and Crichton is Titan. He's been here for 557 years. And he said, it's been a nightmare. The society of only Rimmers. They're a bunch of backstabbing Judases. They found that they couldn't kill him. They decided to just lock him up. And he's like, well, we could escape, but they would immediately capture us. They wouldn't help us. They would sell us back. And so then, obviously, they all have his character flaws. So any good character elements are crimes. And basically, they're all inbred monsters anyway. I hate to ever visit that planet if it still existed in their universe. Trying to figure out how to escape, Lister comes up with this really brave plan, but then Crichton reveals that he's had the teleporter the whole time. So they didn't escape. But this time they time travel again. They originally think it's the past, but it turns out it's not the past, it's the future. It's like, Rimmerworld was like a week, weeks ago. And apparently something hideous has happened to Lister, and Lister gets all concerned, but they jump away before anything is obviously revealed. Nice little cliffhanger here. Again, tight, fun little episode. I like it. It's one thing worth noting that this series, there is a lot of talk that apparently this had a lot of fallout from this series, primarily centered around the fact that they had to really rush the schedule, which is something I mentioned in a previous episode. But next week, we will have Out of Time, which will be our final episode. Ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Won't give it away unless you know. But that's also a fun episode too, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, comment, all that fun stuff. Write me. I've got our notfunnyguys.offthereal@gmail.com. It's in the description below. I've got in the ticker below right now. Write me about things you want to see me cover on the show. I've got a list of my stuff, like I've been talking about, that I want to get into. But after that, everything's kind of fair game. I'm going to keep rolling on taking ideas. If you want to see me do the episodes in a slightly different way, change up the format. Also, incredibly open to all kinds of input ideas. I'm just looking for what we all are looking for on the internet: engagement. Not love, engagement. That's right. And I'm already taken, folks, so no going steady. Just keep that to yourselves. But if you want to write us about this, so over here on the YouTube channel, we're mainly doing television shows. If you want to check out our other Not Funny stuff, we have over on the main podcast, Not Funny Guys Present Off the Reels. We have our movie podcast show. We cover primarily movies. We're wrapping up Martin Scorsese's only comedy. Only time he's ever done comedy. That will wrap up our Scorsese run. And then we'll be moving on to, and I spoiled it in the last episode, but since I cut that and redid this episode, I'll go ahead and spoil it to you, because by the time you see it, it'll already be practically announced. But we're doing the Jurassic Park films. I have only ever seen in whole the first two and of the original trilogy or so, and then I think the first of the Chris Pratt ones. So there's a couple in there that I've never really seen, or the whole version of them. So I don't know what I'm getting myself into. You tell me. Let me know. We'll see. I'll survive. And then I think Casey's picking, so yay. But that being said, we also have, if that's not your thing, we also have Casey and Eric, my other not funny guy colleagues. They do a podcast called Wrestling with the Horror of It All, where they talk about wrestling and horror movies. And then finally, if that's not your thing, we do have one other podcast. We have an academic short discussion podcast called Not Funny Guys Present Thinking About Thinking, where I and Dr. John and our not funny gal, Dr. Kristen, talk about anything from AI to trad wives, culture, a little bit of politics, mainly try to stay away from that, but cultural stuff, AI, all kinds of things that we are thinking about as academics. And I'll just say in advance, I think some of her topic episodes are way more fun in my opinion, but that's me. But that being said, in the meantime, like I said, like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. As Charlotte Dobray, one of my favorite YouTubers, says, subscribe! But instead of cutting you off here, let me just quickly remind you to not be a smeghead. Keep it not funny. And I'll see you next time.